Nobody in my family stood by me when I became a single mother. But once I started earning well, suddenly they wanted to reconnect. I never imagined their reaction would cut so deeply. Perhaps I was naive, assuming family ties carried more weight than they truly did. When I told them I was pregnant at 22, I sat in our crowded living room, the smell of my mother's burnt coffee lingering in the air. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd ever felt. My mother's expression shifted from shock to disappointment to what looked like disgust. She slammed her mug down so hard it chipped the wooden table. "How could you be so careless?" Those were her first words. Not congratulations, not concern, just judgment dressed as motherly disappointment. My father didn't even glance at me. His eyes stayed fixed on the evening news, jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle twitch. Only during a commercial break did he speak, still facing the screen. "I suppose he's not going to marry you." Not a question, an accusation spoken with resignation. "He's not ready for this responsibility," I tried to explain, my voice quieter than I intended. "But I want to keep the baby. I can manage this." That's when my older brother Marcus laughed from the kitchen doorway. "Handle this? You can barely pay your car insurance on time. You think raising a child is a joke?" My younger sister Emma just shook her head while texting furiously. "Great. Now I'll have to tell everyone at college that my sister got pregnant by some guy who won't even take responsibility." She looked up at me, irritation written all over her face. "Do you know how embarrassing this is for the rest of us?" Her words cut deeper than anything physical could. This wasn't how I imagined telling them. I expected some concern, maybe disappointment, but also support. Instead, it felt like I'd committed an unforgivable crime against our family's reputation. "What will the neighbors think?" my mother finally asked, rubbing her temples as if my pregnancy gave her a headache. "Mrs. Patterson's daughter just got engaged. What do I tell her about you?" "Maybe you can say you're going to be a grandmother," I suggested quietly, though I knew it wasn't the answer she wanted. When my father finally turned toward me, the disappointment in his eyes made my chest ache. "You made your bed, sweetheart. Now you get to lie in it. Don't expect us to clean up this mess." The rest of the evening blurred into silence and hushed conversations that stopped whenever I walked into the room. Marcus left without a word. Emma went upstairs, no doubt to call her friends and complain about her reckless sister. That night, lying in my childhood bed surrounded by old posters and trophies, I realized something had permanently shifted. The people I thought would catch me when I fell had just stood aside and watched me hit the ground. I placed my hand on my still flat stomach and made a promise that would define the next decade. I would prove them all wrong. Not just about raising this child, but about who I really was beneath their low expectations. I had been quietly holding on to a small hope that time might mend the distance between us, that one day they would reach out and want to be part of Lily's life. But that moment in the grocery store ended that hope completely. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted erasure. In their version of a perfect family story, Lily and I simply didn't exist. The promotion came as a complete surprise. I had been working as a medical billing specialist for 3 years, quietly handling insurance claims and keeping my head down. When my supervisor called me into her office that Tuesday morning, I expected another routine task. Instead, she offered me the position of department manager. Your accuracy rate is the highest we've seen, she said, and you've been taking those online coding certification courses in your own time. We need someone with your dedication to oversee our new digital transition. The pay raise was significant, nearly double my previous salary. For the first time since Lily's birth, I could finally breathe financially. We could move to a better apartment and even think about starting a college fund for her. Within a month, the changes in our lives were visible. I traded my old Honda for a reliable used Toyota. We left our cramped one-bedroom for a two-bedroom apartment in a safer area with a playground nearby. Lily began taking dance classes, something I had always wanted to give her but couldn't afford before. A local newspaper ran a small feature on young professionals improving healthcare administration. My photo appeared alongside 3 other managers with a caption about my innovative approach to billing efficiency. It was only a couple of column inches, but it was public recognition of my work. In a small city, news spreads quickly. Within a week of that article, I received my first family contact in years. My cousin Rachel, someone I hadn't spoken to in 6 years, sent me a friend request with a casual message. "Hey girl, saw your picture in the paper. So impressive. I'm actually looking for work right now. Is your company hiring? Would love to catch up sometime." I stared at that message for a long time. Rachel had been at family gatherings where my name was probably never even mentioned. She had certainly never reached out when I was struggling to pay Lily's hospital bills or working 2 part-time jobs to keep our lights on. But now, with a management position and my picture in the paper, suddenly she wanted to reconnect. 2 days later, I ran into Mrs. Patterson, our old neighbor, at the pharmacy. Her face lit up when she saw me, a surprise given how cold she had been after learning about my pregnancy. "Oh my goodness, I heard about your promotion," she said. "Your mother must be so proud. I always told her you'd figure things out." I wondered when she'd said that, since my mother had once told me she'd been too embarrassed to face Mrs. Patterson at all after my pregnancy. But the most telling moment came at the grocery store, the same one where I had encountered my family a year before. I was loading groceries into my new car when I heard someone call my name. I turned to see Uncle Jim walking toward me, smiling. "Well, look who's doing well for herself," he said, glancing at my car and the brand-name groceries I could now afford. "I've been hearing good things about you. That promotion sounds like quite an achievement." He spoke as though we were old friends catching up. Not like someone who had excluded me from his birthday party the year before. He even asked about Lily, though he had never shown interest in meeting his great niece until my financial situation improved. "Your parents must be thrilled," he said, fishing for details. I gave him a neutral smile. "I'm sure they have their own opinions about my life." That night, I sat at my kitchen table thinking about what was happening. After 6 years of silence, family members were suddenly noticing me, not because they missed me or wanted to know Lily, but because my success had made me useful to them. This wasn't a change of heart, it was opportunism. Around that time, a new business opportunity arose through a client at work. Dr. Martinez, one of our biggest accounts, mentioned she needed someone to handle billing for her growing practice and a few referrals. When she offered me the contract, I realized it was my chance to build something of my own. I spent 3 months researching, planning, and saving for startup costs. Working nights and weekends, I built a client base and launched my medical billing consultancy, Precision Healthcare Solutions. Within 6 months, I had 12 practices as clients and was earning more than triple my old salary. The local business journal featured my company in its Emerging Entrepreneurs section, showing a photo of me surrounded by computer screens and coding manuals. The day the article came out, my phone began ringing. First was Rachel again, this time calling instead of messaging. "I saw the article about your business. Congratulations. I've been thinking about changing careers. Medical billing sounds fascinating. Maybe you could teach me the ropes. I'm a fast learner." Then came my cousin David, who had never spoken to me even as a child. Suddenly, he wanted to discuss investment opportunities and whether I needed a partner with his retail experience. But the call that stood out came from Emma, my sister, who had been embarrassed by me for 7 years. "I can't believe I had to read about your success in the newspaper," she said, her voice carefully measured to sound hurt. "Why didn't you tell family about this amazing business? We would have celebrated with you." I almost laughed. Would you have? I thought. There hadn't been much celebrating when I was working 3 jobs to pay for Lily's care. "That was different," she said quickly. "We were all dealing with our own struggles. But now that you've proven yourself, maybe it's time to put the past behind us. Families should support each other, right?" The irony was striking. When I had needed help, I'd been told to manage alone. Now that I didn't need help, they wanted to support me. Marcus called next, even more direct. "I heard about your business from Emma," he said. "Pretty impressive. I've been thinking about switching careers myself. Construction work is hard on the body. Maybe you could bring me on. Family business sounds nice." Even Mrs. Patterson reappeared, visiting my office to see the neighborhood. She spent 20 minutes praising my success before finally saying, "My daughter Jennifer is graduating soon. I was hoping you might have an entry-level spot for her. She's such a hard worker, and I know you value family connections." Family connections from the same woman who had whispered about me 6 years ago. Every conversation followed the same pattern: praise for my success, then a request for something. No acknowledgement of the years of silence, no explanation, just entitlement. That evening, I sat in my car outside Lily's dance studio, watching her practice. She was 7, confident and happy, unaware that half her relatives had spent the day trying to figure out how to profit. From my success, I realized I was at a crossroads. Let them back in and pretend the past didn't matter, or maintain the boundaries they had forced me to build. The first real test came when my mother called me directly for the first time in 7 years. Her voice was warm in a way that felt practiced. "Honey, I've been thinking about you so much lately," she began, as if we'd spoken just last week. "I saw the article about your business. I'm so proud of what you've accomplished." I let the silence stretch. She had earned that awkward pause. "I was hoping we could get coffee," she continued. "It's been too long. I miss having my daughter around." The daughter she had been too embarrassed to acknowledge for 7 years was now someone she missed. "I'm pretty busy with the business these days," I said neutrally. "Of course, you must be so busy. Maybe I could stop by your office sometime." 2 days later, she arrived unannounced at lunch hour, dressed in her best clothes and carrying a gift bag. She moved through my office like she was inspecting it, commenting on my computer setup and framed degrees. "This is so impressive, sweetheart. You always were the smart one." She handed me the bag, a mug reading "World's Best Daughter" and some expensive chocolates. She spent an hour asking about my business model, client base, and revenue. When I mentioned Lily's achievements, she nodded politely but didn't ask for photos or details. The real reason for her visit became clear when she began talking about family. "Your father's been having some health issues. Nothing serious, but medical bills add up. Marcus lost his job too. The economy is hard on working families. It's wonderful you're in a position to help. Family should take care of each other. A week later, Marcus came to my apartment with his twins. He introduced them to Lily, who was meeting cousins she never knew existed. "Uncle Marcus," she said excitedly. "Sorry it's taken so long," he said. "Adult life gets complicated." After the kids went to play, Marcus got to his point: his financial struggles, his wife's health, and his hope that I could help him cover rent and groceries until he found another job. Family helps family, right? That phrase became a constant refrain. Emma asked if I'd co-sign her car loan. Uncle Jim wondered if I needed a receptionist for his unemployed daughter. Even distant cousins reached out through social media with similar requests. Each conversation started with praise and ended with a favor. The manipulation escalated when my mother called crying about Dad's serious heart condition and expensive medication. She positioned me as either the loving daughter who saved her father or the heartless child who let him suffer. But when I asked for details, his diagnosis, the medication, her story became vague. "The doctors use such complicated terms," she said. "All I know is he needs help, and you're the only one who can provide it." Marcus took a more aggressive approach, showing up unannounced at my office, interrupting a client meeting. "What's your problem?" he demanded. "Mom called about Dad's medication, and you haven't even responded. Do you hate us so much you'd let your own father die?" I kept my voice calm, aware my staff could hear through the walls. I asked for medical documentation to understand the situation. "Documentation?" he scoffed. "What are you, some insurance investigator? This is our father. You either care or you don't." He leaned forward, using the same intimidation he'd used in our childhood. "You know what I think? Success has made you cold. You've forgotten where you came from and who helped you get there." The irony was staggering. "Who helped me get here, Marcus?" "Because he said quickly. "You made choices. Dad didn't choose to have heart problems." Emma's approach was subtler. She began attending Lily's school events, loudly playing the devoted aunt. "It's wonderful Lily has such a strong family support system," she'd say for others to hear. After one recital, she cornered me in the parking lot, tears in her eyes. "I regret so much about the past, but we can build better relationships moving forward." Then came her real point, her financial problems. "I was hoping you could help me consolidate my debt. Nothing huge, just enough to get back on track so I can be a better aunt to Lily." The requests became more frequent. Uncle Jim said his daughter's wedding needed financial help. David wanted a $20,000 investment for his business proposal. The most manipulative moment came when they began using Lily directly. During one of Marcus's visits, I overheard him telling her about all the fun she was missing. "Your cousins go fishing with Grandpa every weekend. Grandma makes the best cookies. Maybe if your mom wasn't so stubborn, you could be part of that." That night, Lily asked me why she couldn't go to family dinners like her cousins. The confusion in her 8-year-old eyes made me realize they were now using my daughter to pressure me. They had turned my love for Lily into leverage. This wasn't reconciliation. It was extraction, getting as much as they could while offering nothing but the promise of including Lily in a family that had excluded her all her life. The pressure campaign peaked when Dad himself arrived at my office one Thursday afternoon. He looked older and frailer, moving slowly and breathing heavily as he climbed the stairs. "Hello, sweetheart," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by." His appearance was calculated for emotional impact. The old cardigan from my childhood, one hand pressed to his chest as if his hurt. "Your mother tells me you've been asking about my medical situation," he said quietly. "I understand your skepticism. I can understand it, given how things were handled when you were younger. Still, I'm hoping you might find it in your heart to help your father in a difficult time." He placed a prescription bottle on my desk. "The medication costs $800 a month, and insurance only covers 60%. At his age, living on a fixed income, that's simply not manageable." The bottle looked real, but I noticed the label had been partly obscured. When I asked to see the full prescription details and his insurance documents, he grew defensive. "I didn't come here to be questioned like a criminal," he said, his voice taking on the stern tone I remembered from childhood. "I came hoping my successful daughter might want to help her father stay alive." The guilt trip was well crafted. He spoke of being proud of my accomplishments, regretting the distance between us, and hoping we could rebuild something meaningful while there was still time. "I may not have many years left," he added, saying it would mean everything to spend them getting to know my daughter and rebuilding our family. Yet, when I asked specific questions about his condition, his answers were vague. He couldn't explain why he needed that particular expensive medication or what alternatives had been considered. The next week, Emma appeared at my apartment with a crisis of her own. She was crying before she even came through the door, mascara streaking down her face. "I'm going to lose everything," she sobbed, collapsing onto my couch. "My apartment, my car, everything. I made some bad financial choices, and now the bank is foreclosing on my condo." She explained that she had co-signed loans for her ex-boyfriend and was now stuck with debts she couldn't repay. She needed $15,000 immediately to keep her home. "I know I don't deserve your help after how we treated you," she said through tears, "but I'm desperate, and you're the only family member with the means to help. I'll pay you back. I just need time to get back on my feet." She painted herself as a victim of circumstances she couldn't control, forgetting how she once told me to handle my own problems during my own financial crisis. The emotional pressure peaked when they organized a family intervention. My mother invited me to Sunday dinner, saying it would just be immediate family and that they wanted to discuss healing our relationships. I arrived to find the entire extended family gathered in my parents' living room, looking at me with concern and disappointment. It felt like walking into an ambush disguised as a family meeting. "We're worried about you," Mom began, her voice full of artificial concern. "Success has changed you, and not for the better. You've become cold and suspicious of the people who love you most." Uncle Jim nodded gravely. "We understand you went through hard times, but holding grudges isn't healthy. Family forgiveness matters." They had crafted a story where I was the problem, the bitter, successful daughter who'd forgotten her roots and abandoned her struggling family. Each person shared stories about hardships and health issues, building a case for why I had a moral duty to help. "You have so much now," Grandma Rose said softly. "Surely you can spare something for the people who raised you and loved you." The coordinated nature of their appeal made it clear this had been planned and rehearsed. They weren't asking for help. They were demanding it, using guilt, shame, and family obligation to force my compliance. Sitting in that familiar living room, surrounded by faces that once meant everything to me, I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. They wanted honesty. They were about to get it. "You want to talk about family?" I said, my voice cutting through their rehearsed concerns. "Let's talk about family. Let's talk about the family that told a pregnant 22-year-old to handle her own problems." The room fell silent. Mom tried to speak, but I held up my hand. "No, You asked for this conversation. You get to hear all of it. I stood, needing the physical advantage. Let's talk about the family that was too embarrassed by my pregnancy to attend their own granddaughter's birth. The family that canceled social events rather than explain my existence to neighbors. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Now, honey, that's not entirely fair. Fair? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. You want to discuss what's fair? When Lily was 2 years old and fighting pneumonia in the hospital, I called every single person in this room, begging for help with $12,000 in medical bills. Do you remember what you told me, Dad? He looked down at his hands, his earlier fragility gone. You hung up on me. Actually hung up while your granddaughter was in intensive care. And you, Mom, told me my decisions were my responsibility and that you couldn't solve every crisis I created. We were going through our own difficulties then, Mom said weakly. We all make mistakes under pressure. Mistakes? I turned to Marcus, who was staring at the floor. What was your mistake, brother? When you laughed at me for thinking I could handle being a single mother? Or when you told me Lily's hospitalization was the consequence of my choices? Marcus looked up, his face flushed with anger. You're being vindictive. We're trying to move forward here. And Emma, I continued, ignoring him, your mistake was calling me an embarrassment to the family and saying you'd have to explain my situation to your college friends. Emma's tears stopped, replaced by anger. That was years ago. People grow and change. You're right. People do change. I changed. I learned I couldn't count on any of you when my daughter's life was at stake. I learned blood doesn't guarantee loyalty or love. Grandma Rose spoke, her voice trembling. We've always loved you, dear. Sometimes people just handle things badly. Loved me? I stared at her, recalling the grocery store incident. You looked right at me and your great-granddaughter in the supermarket and turned away because you didn't want the family to know you'd acknowledged us. The room erupted, everyone talking at once, trying to justify or minimize their actions. Enough, I said sharply, silencing them. You want to know what's changed about me? I used to believe family meant something unconditional. I used to think love survived disappointment and difficulty. I looked at each of them. But you taught me your love had conditions. It required me to be successful enough to benefit you, respectable enough not to embarrass you, and desperate enough to need you. You're twisting everything, Marcus said angrily. We're trying to rebuild, and you're throwing the past at us. The past? I laughed again. You mean the 8 years where none of you existed in my life or my daughter's? Or do you mean the recent past where you suddenly developed family feelings the moment you heard I had money? The truth hung in the air. Uncle Jim tried to salvage it. We understand you're hurt, but family forgiveness. Stop, I said coldly. Don't you dare talk to me about forgiveness. You want forgiveness? You want family relationships? You should have wanted them when I had nothing to offer except the need for love and support. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. You don't get to abandon someone and then demand access to their success. You don't get to treat a person like a shameful secret and then expect them to fund your lives. Where are you going? Mom called after me. We're not finished. I turned back one last time. Yes, we are. We're completely finished. The phone call started immediately after I left. My mother called 16 times in 2 days, leaving voicemails that swung from tearful apologies to angry accusations. Marcus texted me, calling me heartless and ungrateful. Emma showed up at my office twice, demanding security let her in. I changed my number and instructed my assistant to screen all calls and visitors. When Dad appeared at my office building the next week, looking frail and claiming chest pains, I watched from my window as security escorted him to his car under my explicit instructions. "You can't be serious," my assistant said, watching him shuffle away. "That's really your father?" "That's the man who hung up on me when my daughter was dying in the hospital," I replied calmly. "Yes, I'm serious. ... The family's reaction to my boundaries was swift. Within a month, I heard through acquaintances that I was being painted as the villain, the heartless daughter who'd forgotten her roots, the cold businesswoman who valued money over family, the ungrateful child who'd abandoned her parents. They left out the 8 years of abandonment that came before my success, the hospital crisis they ignored, and the way they only renewed contact when I became financially useful. I moved Lily and myself to an upscale neighborhood across town where nobody knew our history. I enrolled her in a private school where she thrived, surrounded by children whose parents valued education over gossip. "Why did we move again?" Lily asked one evening as we unpacked her books. "Because sometimes we outgrow where we used to live," I told her, "and sometimes it's healthy to start fresh." She nodded, satisfied. At 9 years old, she was confident and happy. Unaware she'd been rejected by an entire side of her family before she was born. My business grew. I hired 6 employees, expanded into medical practice management, and opened a second office. The success felt different now, cleaner, not tied to the desperate need to prove myself to people who never believed in me anyway. When acquaintances asked about my family, I developed a standard response: "We're not close." Most didn't push. Those who did quickly learned it wasn't up for discussion. The final contact attempt came 2 years later, when Grandma Rose was diagnosed with cancer. Mom sent a handwritten letter to my office, saying Rose was dying and wanted to meet Lily properly before she passed. I read the letter twice, then filed it away without responding. Grandma Rose had had 11 years to meet Lily. She'd chosen not to, even ignoring us in public to avoid awkward questions. Lily, now 11, had a life full of friends, activities, and adults who valued her for who she was, rather than what she could provide. She had teachers who celebrated her achievements, classmates who liked her, and neighbors who remembered her birthday. She had a mother who would never abandon her, judge her for mistakes, or treat her love as conditional. On quiet evenings, while Lily did homework at the kitchen table and I reviewed business reports, I sometimes wondered if I'd made the right choice. The complete severance felt extreme. But then I'd remember the hospital room where I sat alone, the grocery store where my grandmother turned away, and the calculated way they approached me only after learning of my success. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. Some relationships, once poisoned, can't be purified. Some people prove, through time, they don't deserve access to your life or your love. My parents lived 20 minutes away, but might as well have been on another planet. Marcus continued construction work, likely still resentful I wouldn't bail him out. Emma lost her condo despite her pleas. Uncle Jim's daughter married without my contribution, and the family managed without my financial rescue. They wanted me to believe I owed them because of blood ties and shared history. But I'd learned something more valuable. Family isn't about biology or obligation. It's about who shows up when you need them, who celebrates your successes without expecting payment, and who loves you consistently through both triumph and struggle. Lily and I had built that kind of family with friends, neighbors, colleagues, and each other. We created something better, based on choice rather than chance, on love rather than leverage, on presence rather than pressure. The girl who'd cried in a hospital parking lot, desperate for her family's help, was gone. In her place was a woman who understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who only value you for what you can give. I'd built a life where respect wasn't bought with money, where love wasn't conditional on success, and where my daughter would never have to beg for acceptance from people who were supposed to love her unconditionally. In the end, that was worth more than any family reconciliation could ever be.